Welcome, listeners, to www.IronRadio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowery.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening. Welcome, IronRadio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. I'm an exercise physiologist, and I'm a sports nutritionist, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
Hey, this is Dr. Mike T. Nelson. Did a PhD in exercise physiology, master's in mechanical engineering, biomechanics, and I'm the owner of Extreme Human Performance.
Hey guys, Justen Straight here, fitness enthusiast, bodybuilding enthusiast, and supplement guru.
All right. Okay, people, we have mail today. Several people got a hold of us this week. I'm going to pull about half of them. And then one study. And then we're going to get to Justin's origin story. So hopefully you'll leave today getting a little behind the scenes about sort of a day in the life of a protein and nutrition company, that sort of thing. But let's get to the mail. Some of these are brief. One of them is a programming question. And Mike, we know how long these can be, but okay. This is a follow-up from Paul. He contacted us recently. He was participating in our fall-winter contest about making 2 tweets and an iTunes review. He just said, hey, I just heard my name on the latest podcast. Wow, thanks a bunch. He says, as a student who has also resorted to eating those cans of mackerel, so he's referring to Phil and you too, right, Mike? Both of you guys.
Oh, yeah, I've done that.
I'm not going to say no to free stuff, but I would really appreciate any passed down wisdom from experienced, quote, warrior nerd, close quote. I'm not that strong. I do 2, 3, and 4 plates, but my old coach was an amazing bodybuilder, and I know the value of good advice. So thanks, Paul. He's just following up. We're going to send him some swag. And again, it's that easy. All you have to do until the contest runs through, and I think we'll run it through probably New Year's, but just make 2 tweets about Iron Radio and leave us an iTunes review, and then fire an email to me through IronRadio.org. If Fortress gets it, that's fine. He'll send it to me. He's still alive. His work schedule.
He's not dead.
Yeah, he's not dead. And then you could tell me what you want: mugs, mouse pads, stuff like that. This next one is from Josh. He says, "Hi Rob, sorry to email you. I couldn't find Lonnie's email on the other website to apply for the contest, so I did make a tweet and Facebook shout out, and I would love to get a mug if you have any left." So in short, Josh, yeah, that's all you have to do. I've got your email. I'll follow up with you. I hesitate to read this next part, but it's kind of funny. He says, additionally, I'm not from the very beginning of Iron Radio, but I've listened to every episode for the last couple of years. I finally took the time today to look at some pictures of you guys. You're beasts, he says. I'm not going to go on, except he sort of says, I encourage everybody to take the time to look for pictures of these guys online. Way more meathead than egghead, he said. And sometimes I don't know if, and Mike, you must feel like this too. Like you're sort of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. You don't know which is that an insult or probably not. That's more flattering, I guess. But
yeah,
so he appreciates the meathead side of it.
That's good.
So he says, thanks for everything. I love the show. So thanks, Josh. That was cool. And then this last one from the listener mail is a programming question. This is from John. Hey guys, and he goes down the whole list of all of us, Doctors Nelson, Lowery, and Dr. Mike. First, as always, let me start with saying I love the show. I just found it about 4 months ago and have gone through all the back episodes to get caught up to current.
Nice.
I have enjoyed it enough that I have become a supporting member, so that's cool. Thank you, John. Let's see. The information you guys put out week after week is invaluable, as is just the general gym talk in the chat. As to the reason for the email, I'm looking for your advice and input. Here's a disclaimer. It's about programming mostly. So you can tell he's listened to us for a while because, we do get, and listeners, we'll occasionally get these emails like, put me on a diet and exercise program to do this and this and this, not realizing that that's, hundreds of hours worth of work.
Yeah.
But he's giving us that disclaimer. I appreciate that, John. He says, I'm 31 years old, 5'10". I hover around 175 pounds, roughly 20% fat. Not entirely relevant in context, but just to give you a general idea of where I'm coming from. I suppose I'm not exactly your normal listener. I do not currently have any plans to compete in powerlifting or bodybuilding, but listening to your podcast lately has really helped me get my head in the right place to get back to resistance training. I currently lean more toward the endurance side. So back to the topic at hand. I recently joined an area YMCA for their weight room and pool, and they have free weights there. Hard to find an area at a reasonable price, for resistance work. I could commit to 3 days per week, guaranteed lifting time. As of right now, my training week is split Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, Saturday. So it looks like 3 to 4 days per week. I currently train Tuesday as my strength day, 5x5, squat, bench, dead, overhead, and pull-ups or lat pull-downs. My current goal is building a base of strength, again, and using the body split days for hypertrophy and quote-unquote vanity work. Of course, I want to look good as well, LOL. And then he says, he's an endurance guy. So he says, after the marathon, it will be determined how much I wish to continue with my endurance sports. I suppose to narrow it down, my question is more about realistic expectations. Knowing that endurance and strength sports aren't always friends, would my current plan work to build a solid base for strength and hypertrophy while I am in marathon training? I'm basically starting anew as my level of resistance training. I did CrossFit for a couple of years, but I have not been in the gym for a year and a half. And I know I lost a lot. I have an uphill battle, especially with the endurance training thrown in. So will this work? And then he goes on to ask a few things and says, thanks for all you guys do, John. Well, I know you don't have this in front of you, Mike, but what do you think about that? My gut response to this is, if you are doing those 5x5s, if you're splitting that up across the 3 days in the gym, that's certainly better than if it is 1 day in the gym. It's hard for me to tell as I'm reading this live that this is, I can't think you're doing 5 sets of 5 in the squat, bench, dead, overhead, and pull-ups and pull-downs in the same day.
Oof, that's a
I wouldn't think that's
multi-hour session there at least.
Let's see. Oh, here. Thursday and Friday/Saturday, I use the upper-lower split with accessory work in the bench, squat, and dead. Okay, so your compound movements are the right choice, I can tell you. I mean, it's not like you're wasting too much time with concentration curls,
Yeah.
But what do you think, Mike? So just looking at someone he's 5'10", 175, he's 20% body fat, and he's still got the endurance training going on, but he's trying to dedicate a few days a week to strength and hypertrophy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is just trying to figure out what his intention and goal is. I mean, if his goal is still to run the marathon and be, somewhat competitive or finish that, then adding a little bit of strength training I think is fine. But with the amount of volumes, again, depending upon, what level of endurance athlete he's at, I think it's going to be pretty hard to see, massive progress doing both. And obviously, if he's a newer lifter, he can get better on, some of the lifts and still do good at a marathon. But at some point, the closer you kind of push those, you're going to see it's called an interference effect. So I agree with him. I think the 5x5, like you said, if it's split out over a Tuesday, Thursday, either Friday or Saturday, probably pretty good, although that can, be a little bit higher on the volume for that, depending on how long he's running. Adding a little bit of hypertrophy stuff after that, I think is fine. I would probably put a rough time cap on the total time he's in the gym, maybe an hour, hour and a half at the most, just to try to keep that down somewhat. And then I think doing endurance training, at least on the separate days, would be better. So that way, if you're lifting on Tuesday, at least the stimulus is going towards, strength and a little bit of hypertrophy. And then if Wednesday you're doing endurance, then the stimulus is endurance. There's a study that came out this past July looking actually at female lifters, And real quickly, what they did is they had one do like a strength training and did some plyometric-based work. And then the other group did the exact same training, but they did about, I think it was 40 minutes of about 50 to 60% of their VO2 max on a treadmill, and it was directly after the lifting session. And the group who did it directly after the lifting session, they saw vertical jump didn't go up as much. They didn't see as much hypertrophy because they were programmed such close to each other, like one right after the other. So I think by splitting them off on other days, you can probably do better. And then it sounds like the marathon's coming up relatively soonish. And once he's done with that, then I think if he wants to kind of pursue the strength and hypertrophy, I would just take the same routine he's doing, probably change it up a little bit. And then I would probably drop the endurance stuff to just more of longer, slower distance type stuff. And he's probably going to be pretty good because he's not going to be running probably the same length of mileage either.
Yeah. No, it's true. In a similar vein, I don't have the authors' names in front of me, but I've even incorporated these into slides when I teach strength conditioning. But there's some great studies that the military did with guys who both ran and did resistance work. And
yeah, the older ones.
Yeah, and and it does hamper your gains, and it sounds like he understands that, right? So
yeah.
It's true, and I like the idea of sort of all that almost micro periodizing, like you're saying, Mike. Like on the strength day, like if you've got 2 days a week for upper or lower body, try to expend as little calories on those days as you can, other than the gym, and keep the calories and protein flowing, so you can at least be as anabolic as possible until you're back at the running. Draining calories and everything else. So you're still going to go through this cyclical, like maybe positive calorie balance strength day, arguably negative calorie balance endurance day. But as you know, that is kind of the price. So when you use the word realistic, it is going to slow things down. But that's not to say that active endurance trainers can't build some strength in a little size. Yeah, just get yourself in a surplus of calories and protein, I would think, on the upper body strength day and the lower body, lifting day. And I don't know, it's going to be tough to do things like volume work for your lower body. You can't get back out there and do your marathon training if your legs feel like lead, like you're rocked from your glutes to your ankles.
Yeah.
So it's tough, and there's going to be some recovery things. I mean, some people will play around with hopeful recovery aids, and I'm not saying these are guaranteed, but some people do different antioxidant or anti-inflammatory things. So, I mean, C and E wouldn't hurt you. It's going to help your immune system a little anyway. I'm not saying that's going to make you less sore necessarily. Curcumin, which is our study of the day, is about that, which is, of course, from turmeric or curry powder. People will take that. In fact, I'm taking some of that right now with a little bromelain in it, which is a digestive enzyme that also may help with joints, maybe. But I would think just flooding an excess of calories and protein on the strength days, sort of micro periodization might help. And then check in with us, and let us know if you're able to make any gains at all, because you are aware that this is uphill. So.
Yeah, and the study I quoted was actually the author's last name is Terzis, Terzis. It's actually April of 2016. Early phase interference between low intensity running and power training in moderately trained females.
So we're not making it up.
Nope, they can go look it up. It's actually a really cool study.
Not making this up. All right, Justin, thanks for bearing with us. We got one more here, and I just pulled this. I got this through the Institute of Food Technologists, but I also pulled the journal article too.
Strength and muscle sport news.
It says, here's the news part of it. Curcumin may help treat depression. Now, I just mentioned this being an anti-inflammatory, and especially since I tore the cartilage of my left knee, this is something that I'm trying to use instead of just more ibuprofen, NSAIDs all the time. But it says, a study published in the Journal of Affective Disorders, here we go, shows that curcumin, an active ingredient found in turmeric extract, may be used successfully to treat major depressive disorder and anxiety. Now, that's very interesting. I would not have guessed this. That's not why I'm taking it, but It says a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study used a high-potency turmeric extract to study its effects in 110 subjects, aged 18 to 65, so broad range of adults. They were dosed twice daily, and I'll get to this when I get to the abstract. It says the curcumin plus saffron groups collectively showed decreased depressive symptoms at each of the 4-week intervals, with little difference between the groups. In other words, so doses and modifications on the active weren't that big of a difference, but they were different compared to the placebo. Although the placebo groups also improved over the first 4 weeks, those improvements were not maintained through the full 12-week study. Measurements of present anxiety and generalized anxiety during the 12 weeks decreased by 7 and 6 points, respectively. And I know without the scale that doesn't help, but compared to the placebo group. It says depression treatment responders were qualified by attaining a 50% decrease in some of these depressive scores. And then it goes on to say atypical depression, which has been found to be associated with inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein or IL-6 or tumor necrosis factor, were even better affected, I believe. So let me go to the study, because not that I completely distrust science journalists, but mostly I do.
But yet I do.
Not saying, just saying. Efficacy of curcumin and or saffron/curcumin combination for the treatment of major depression, a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study. So this is by Lopresti and Drummond. Highlights. Curcumin and saffron are effective for the treatment of depression. Another highlight, and again, this is from the journal page. Curcumin and saffron are effective in reducing anxiety in depressed adults. A third highlight, varying doses have no effect on the outcome. And then finally, curcumin and saffron have greater efficacy for atypical depression. So, and again, I'm not going to read through this whole abstract. It just says several studies have supported the antidepressant effects of curcumin and of saffron on people with major depressive disorder. And I find that interesting in itself, because oftentimes when you hear about St. John's wort for more for minor depressive symptoms, not something very serious. And maybe I'll ask Kelly and check back in next week about some of the differences between minor and major depression. But it says randomized double-blind trial, 123 individuals with major depressive disorder were allocated one of 4 treatment conditions: placebo, a low-dose curcumin extract that was 250 milligrams twice a day, a high-dose curcumin extract, which is 500 milligrams twice a day, or a combined low-dose curcumin plus saffron. And again, I think they were finding that the variations in these active groups, actual intervention groups, weren't that different, but they did differ from the control groups. And again, it did say greater efficacy in people with atypical depression compared to the remainder of patients. The atypical depression types had a 65% response rate versus just a 35% response rate. No differences were found between differing doses of curcumin or the curcumin-saffron combo.
And in that, they didn't use like a black pepper or anything to increase the absorption of curcumin, because I think that's usually kind of a poor bioavailability, but yet it seemed to work in this study, maybe because of the dose or combination, maybe?
Right. There is no mention of bioperin or black pepper or some of these absorption enhancers. But that's not to say that they weren't using, a particular brand that incorporated some of that maybe. It's a good point that a lot of these botanicals, they don't, they seem to do amazing things in animals or in a dish, but if you can't if you're absorbing like 0.5% of the dose, you might have to up the dose. But interestingly here, they were showing the dose differences didn't matter from each other. The 250 mg twice a day versus 500, that would suggest that you must be absorbing it. I don't know.
Interesting.
So, who would have thought that something that we do for joint inflammation and whatnot might help our mood? So.
Nice.
Okay. Thanks for your patience, Justin. Let's talk about you before we go to break. Listeners, I've bumped into Justin a few times on flights and back and forth to the International Society of Sports Nutrition Conference, and I know he works for Glanbia Nutritionals, which is principally a protein company, I believe. But as you mentioned, also bodybuilding enthusiast and that sort of thing. And before we go any further, I should also say Justen has an impressive beard. I don't know if you're still sporting that, brother.
Of course, man.
Yeah.
I'm out here in Denver, so I have to fit in accordingly with the mountain men.
Yeah, well, impressive. So, having said that, maybe just tell people about your origin story. Like, what led you into, whether it's protein companies or bodybuilding, or how did this all begin?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of a funny story. I mean, I'm still considered a young guy in the industry, but I've got to know quite a few people like you two gentlemen on the call here, and it's been great. You know, I've lived in 11 states. I've been to 3 different high schools, so I've kind of traveled the country already, and that's definitely kind of helped shape who I am today. With that said, going from high school to high school, the first high school I went to, majority of the high schools were in the Midwest. Really small school, so everyone played all sports: basketball, track, football, golf. I always kind of had an odd combo because I've been playing golf since I was 2. My dad taught me how to play, and then I also had a knack of hitting people in football. And so for me, the first high school I went to, the gym itself was not up to par, and the strength and conditioning program that we had for the high school team wasn't that great. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, I really didn't have a strong urge to get bigger, stronger, faster. I just loved playing ball with my friends. And so anyway, my dad went out on a limb and signed me up with one of the top trainers there in the city, and I was not pleased at all. I was not excited. But I tell you what, man, I mean, after training a couple months and my body starting to change, putting on weight, getting more muscular, the leanness with it as well, I loved it, and I just became addicted to it. And this guy I trained with, Ryan Everett, out there, he's a monster. He's 6'4", 270, real lean, and he became my idol. I said, I want to look like this guy someday. Now, granted, I'm only 5'9", 5'10", so I'll never have that height, but just the sheer size to him was just amazing to me. So that's kind of when I got the bug, if you will. And so, playing sports, I'd always train, honestly, outside of the school gym just because the facility was that much better. And so I jumped around from high school to high school, and I always kept that same pathway, if you will. And so the last high school I went to in Lincoln, Nebraska, my main 2 sports there were football and golf, honestly. And it was kind of an odd combination for a bigger guy, but the golf thing started to wear on me because golf is a lot of mental patience kind of thing. And obviously football, I was playing strong safety, free safety, so a little bit different component there. And so, finally I was just, I didn't have as much passion for football, and golf was I just couldn't do the patience thing anymore. So I found my home, the gym. I could push heavy weight and still kind of get that aggressiveness, and I didn't have to be patient, hitting the ball and walking or trying to make a putt, and so it was overall it was just kind of an escape, if you will, and I became addicted in a good way to just getting bigger and obviously looking good as well in terms of aesthetics. And so I guess I finished high school. I went to the University of Nebraska. I studied nutrition, health, and exercise science as well as biochem. And honestly, I wanted to design pharma for a long time, but just based upon my personality and my nature, I knew I wasn't going to be a lab guy. And so I kind of changed directions from biochem after, taking respective courses and just focused on nutrition, health, and exercise science. So within my collegiate career, if you will, my freshman year, I was a volunteer intern for the strength and conditioning program for the Huskers. Now, Lonnie, I know you're out in Ohio there, so you might be an Ohio State boy, but I guess I've always grown up around the Huskers, and so it was pretty cool. So my freshman year, I helped out with the football program there. A couple early mornings, a couple afternoons. And that's when Ndamukong Suh was playing for them. So it was really kind of cool as a young guy being in there with most of these juniors and seniors. Where it started, the NSCA, the Bigger, Faster, Stronger program, Boyd Epley's stuff. So it was really kind of neat to learn from that perspective. And so after my couple months there, I just focused on school. That way I could get my academics done. And then actually my junior year, I guess I should mention throughout this whole time, I had always been a gym rat and a supplement guy. And I was always familiar with who's doing what out there in terms of brands, anywhere from Optimum to Universal and Animal, all the above. And so I just kind of submersed myself in it, and I started researching more and more on ingredients, brands, what folks were doing, what's kind of new and exciting. And that's kind of when the research came in as well. I started learning more about not only the NSCA side for the training perspective, but the ISSN side as well. And so my junior year, I needed to find an internship. And so I said, well, what am I going to do? What am I interested in? And I thought, a supplement company would be perfect for me. And so ideally, I wanted to formulate. I wanted to get on with a supplement brand owner and formulate new product. Unfortunately, it's easier said than done because most of these guys have a fairly small team, and a lot of these guys, they stick around and for quite some time. So getting on is quite difficult. And at that time, obviously Lincoln from Denver here is about 8 hours. And so I looked out here and I called up Muscle Farm. Obviously, they're a well-known brand now and at that time as well, big sponsor of the UFC. So I said, well, I'll give someone a call, see if I can get in there. So I left a message for the CEO, and the next day I got a call back from his secretary saying, hey, I heard you're interested in an internship.
Wow.
And unfortunately, for me, it was unpaid, but luckily I have a great support system from my folks. My dad said, heck yeah, if this is what you want to do, we'll make it happen. You go out there. So I moved out to Denver my junior year over summer for 3 months, and I was an intern for Muscle Farm and their R&D under Paul Falcone. And it was a great experience. I got to learn more about research, RLB protocols, and I got to learn more and more about ingredients. And so that was actually when I went to my first ISSN convention, the NSCA convention, started meeting folks in the industry. And so it was really cool. I enjoyed my time, and unfortunately I had to leave because I had to come back to Lincoln to finish my senior year. And, I kind of continued just poking around. And honestly, this job with Glambia was posted on LinkedIn. And, I guess I should mention when I went to college, I had always worked retail supplements, just part-time, for some money to pay for gas and whatever else. And, so I'd worked at Max Muscle, Elite Performance Nutrition, and a couple other ones as well. So I always had, the sales background in terms of retail. And so, anyway, Glambia had a position posted on LinkedIn, and, it was a director of business development for sports nutrition. And it was way beyond my resume at the time, but I figured, hey, you know what, I'll take a shot at it, take a stab. And I did. I got a phone call back, and the recruiter was like, hey, I can appreciate your ambition here. It looks like you have a strong background in sports and ingredients and nutrition and health and exercise science. And unfortunately, the position you applied for, it might be a little over your head, but I do have a sales position open. What do you think about that? I said, yeah, sure, I'll take a look at it. And it required me to go up to Madison, Wisconsin from Lincoln to interview. And at that time, Glambia was a couple different divisions. But anyway, so it all worked out well. I moved up to Madison, Wisconsin for a year and a half. And then I just got a promotion and moved out to Denver here in February for an outside sales manager role. So that's where I'm at now. And that's cool. Kind of from point A to point B, and we'll see what it brings in the next couple of years here.
Right. Before we go to break, do you have any current lifting goals? I mean, like specific goals, or are you still focused
honestly,
on work?
I kind of do the power building, or however you want to call it. I used to love powerlifting, just moving heavy weight, the 5x5, like the gentleman mentioned earlier on the email that he had sent in. But with that, I always love to look good. I always like the physique aspect of it. And so I kind of mixed and matched. I was always a kind of a hard gainer. I could never put on weight. And, unfortunately, I guess I will admit to you guys, there was at one point where I was eating pizza and Ben and Jerry's before I went to bed just to put on weight. And finally, the weight and the mass started coming with my training, and it kind of all came together. But I never really had any ambition to compete at a professional level. It's just something that I love to do, and living in the industry and around it, it kind of goes hand in hand. This day and age, I think after even being 25, I've taken a beating on some of my shoulders and my elbows, and I'm trying to do a little bit more hypertrophy now, 3-4 sets of 12, some supersets in there just to kind of build that aspect of it as well. Because I remember at one time I was doing, dumbbell military presses for one of the 120s for 8, and I had, solid size, solid strength, but eventually my shoulder gave, and I'm like, okay, maybe I need to try this hypertrophy stuff for a while. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, but it all seems to work out.
Right on. No, good stuff. Just if I can just reiterate something from what I've just heard you say to a lot of listeners is, we're always encouraging people, whether it's competitions, like just go get out there and watch, or put your name on the dotted line, for a contest a year out, or what you've done with your career, which is just reach out. It's amazing sometimes, like the recruiter got back to you and like, well, this might be over your head, but what about this? And that wouldn't have happened if you didn't have the balls to just reach out.
Yeah, you said it, man. That's one thing I've learned, even being young, my pops growing up teaching me, be confident in what you know, and you never know until you ask or you try. And so I figured, hey, I got to start somewhere. Let me put my name in the ring, and I get someone on the phone and just explain who I am and what I'm about. And I think everything works out, and I think, everything has a reason and a meaning to it. So yeah, for sure. I mean, anyone that might be on the fence about something, or well, maybe I shouldn't do it, just try it. At the end of the day, you never know until you try, and so I think that's important.
Sweet. All right, everybody, we are going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to pick Justin's brain about a few things, just to get, again, some insights from behind the scenes at a protein and nutritionals company, and we'll be right back. Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowery. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowery. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowery. You can just Google that, and I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book, but that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks.
Fall and soon winter will be upon us. As the holidays approach and your thoughts turn to giving, please consider your friends here at IronRadio.org. Over the past several years, there have been hundreds of listener comments hoping that Iron Radio stays on the air for years to come. Iron Radio is here for you. But as with any public radio type format, the show is listener supported. That's where you come in. For just $4 per month, you can become a supporting member, keeping your weekly dose of education, experts, and gym talk flowing. Just go to www.ironradio.org and click on the $4 monthly subscribe button near the bottom of the page, or click the donate button at the right of the page for a one-time donation. You are the Iron Brotherhood and Sisterhood. Thanks for helping to create a place for better internet programming for all strength and muscle sports, and happy holidays.
Hi, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowery, and on behalf of Phil and Rob, I'd just like to let listeners know that if you love us or you hate us, we'd like you to leave a comment or perhaps vote for us on iTunes. It helps us out quite a bit on the popularity side of things. You can also follow Dr. Lowery, me, on Twitter. It's Lawnman7 on Twitter if you want to do that. We also have a Facebook page, the Iron Radio listeners page. So whether it's leaving a comment or voting for us or following us on Twitter or Facebook, that would be fantastic. Also, occasionally Rob or myself will write an article for another website, and Phil will as well. So lots of ways to interact, follow us in other media, and vote for us, and keep things going strong on Iron Radio. Thanks.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more, that's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, folks, we're back, and we have Justen Straight from Glanbia Nutritionals, and we're going to look behind the scenes a little bit at what happens at protein companies, if you've ever wondered. And I realize that Glanbia is more than just protein, but if that's the principal focus, that's still great. My first question for everybody, Dr. Nelson and Justen, what makes a high-quality protein supplement? I mean, that seems to be a big part of what you guys do. So whether, like it's an isolate versus a concentrate, hydrolyzed proteins, what does that mean? Or are they beneficial? Even taste. What makes a protein good? Justen, let's start with you.
Okay, sounds good. I guess just like a brief minute on background. So Glanbia, we have a couple different divisions. We're actually based in Ireland. That's our home. Glanbia is known for their dairy side, our whey proteins. With that, we have a grain business for flax and chia. We have a premix vitamin mineral business, colors, flavors. I mean, we're fairly large, so we can hit on almost anything out there anymore in terms of in the ingredient world, if you will. Focusing on the dairy side of things, which, as I mentioned, we're known for. We have several different facilities. We have 2 out in Idaho. We have 1 down in Clovis, New Mexico. The one in Clovis, New Mexico is around 400,000 square foot. It's the second largest cheese plant in the world. We run about 15 million pounds of milk a day through there, so it's quite large. And it's pretty cool to go down and see one of these. Unfortunately, inside, it's a lot of stainless steel tubing, but just the concept of it is pretty neat. Now, Glanbia, probably 8-9 years ago, we started the CFM. So CFM is cross-flow microfiltration. So if you look at protein, there's really 2 ways to go. There's ion exchange and there's cross-flow microfiltration. So, each has their own way of marketing and perks, if you will. But ultimately, CFM now is known as the gold standard, if you will, in the industry. The lactoglobulin content is much, much higher than that of ion exchange and just overall the purity. Most folks like coming to us. We're well known to manufacturers and brand owners across the world just for our lock and key process. I mean, we source our own milk, we make our own cheese. From the cheese, we make our own whey. So it's all under our own roof. So a lot of people like that for peace of mind in terms of purity and quality. So I guess diving into the protein piece, I work most of my background, obviously sports nutrition. So that's my focus here within the Glanbia team. So there's a couple different ways you can go. We have a WPC, a whey protein concentrate. We have a WPI, a whey protein isolate, and then we have a hydrolyzed WPI, a hydrolyzed whey protein isolate. So if you start at the bottom of that scale, so the WPC is more or less, I would say, at the bottom, where the hydrolyzed is more or less at the top in terms of performance and value overall. So a concentrate is typically 80% protein. The fat and the lactose content obviously are a little bit higher on it. So it's something that everyone buys because it's going to be more of the commodity protein, the cheaper protein. It's not quite as versatile. And the reason I say that is because when you step into a WPI, an isolate, that's going to be a 90% protein. The fat and the lactose is much, much, much lower, slim to none. So it's going to be much more versatile for those folks that might be lactose intolerant. It's going to be a lot easier on the stomach. So that one's a little bit more versatile, but you have a step in price when you go to an isolate. And so I guess the next step up from that would be a hydrolyzed whey protein isolate. And that one for sure is going to be the best one that money can buy. Now, granted, there is a big price difference between a hydrolyzed and a WPC, but typically you pay for what you get. So a hydrolyzed means we go in on a whey protein isolate, which is made up of peptides, and we go in and we break those peptides up into shorter chains. Reason for that, gets in the body that much quicker. The digestibility on it is that much easier on the stomach. The only downfall to that I mentioned to a lot of my guys is the bitter notes. When we break those hydrogen bonds, it's releasing bitter notes into the protein. So You have to be working with a solid flavor house on that protein, but it's by far the best one that you can find in terms of overall performance.
Okay, let me ask you something real quick then. Something that I've often wondered about, which is if whey is already a fast protein, right, as far as amino acid delivery,
right?
What would be the benefit in hydrolyzing, or sort of, I hate to use the term pre-digesting because that sounds kind of gross, but what would be the benefit in hydrolyzing an already fast protein?
Right. So I guess if we look at a concentrate, it's really going to be the purity. And then by purity, I mean they're all going to be pure, but in just terms of the protein ratio load. So obviously you have an 80% protein compared to a hydrolyzed, which can almost reach 92% protein. And really what it comes down to is going to be the lactose and the sugar content. And so there's going to be a much, much different panel there, and it's going to digest that much using a hydrolyzed. And so, typically a lot of guys that focus on a hydrolyzed, just because of the price point itself, a lot of these guys are using it strictly right after workout. So it's getting into the body that much quicker. Now, granted, you're right. I mean, a whey is quick no matter which way you spin it. But if you really want to get down to brass tacks, the hydrolyzed is going to get in the body the quickest.
Okay. Yeah. Dr. Nelson, any thoughts so far about what do you prefer, stuff like that?
Yeah, I actually am a big fan of using kind of all of them. So if you open my cupboard right now, I've got, whey protein concentrate, I've got some CFM, I've got 2 different types of hydrolyzed protein. So I've even got, non-dairy based proteins that I'll kind of rotate through. In the past, when I was really busy doing my PhD, I kind of had this idea that, whey protein's such an awesome protein. Maybe I can just kind of live on this. Not intentionally, but kind of happened that way, and was super
protein
stressed out.
And ramen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, oh boy, you didn't want to be around me after about month 3 of that experiment. The digestion and immune stuff was not so good. And not because whey was bad. It was just I was also stressed out of my mind and not sleeping. And
stomach was tore up on it.
Yep. And I didn't rotate anything. I used the exact same one because I was a cheap bastard and didn't want to do anything else. So a lot of people had that experience. Even now when I travel sometimes, I'll actually purposely use a non-whey based protein just for a little bit more variety. I don't really have many issues with dairy. Most people tolerate it pretty good. Right. The other part I have noticed with the hydrolyzed is, some people who have used different types of proteins and complain that it kind of bothers their stomach a little bit, that the hydrolyzed protein doesn't seem to do that. And again, anecdotally, this is in probably a couple dozen cases at this point over the years. I haven't seen too much research on that, but I was wondering what your thoughts are on that, because you're actually hydrolyzing it and you're kind of breaking it down further. Does that make it kind of less of a possible allergen to some people who may be more sensitive to dairy?
Most definitely. And I think the thing that's sensitive to most folks is going to be the lactose content, where, as mentioned before, the concentrate is going to be, and it's not that much higher, but I mean, when it comes down to it, some folks will react to 4 or 5 grams of sugar, where that hydrolyzed is going to be really 0 to maybe 1, if that. And so, it's funny you say that, because that you have a few in your cupboard. If you look at some brands out there, some have concentrate base, some do an isolate. So if you look at like Optima, for instance, they do an isolate concentrate blend. Some go as far as doing a concentrate isolate, maybe a milk protein, as well as a caseinate and an egg. And so it's just kind of a matter of the full spectrum, if you will, of what they want to hit, who they're marketing to, what their demographic is. And it's also interesting you talk about vegan proteins, because that's something that's blowing up right now. It's massive. And a lot of the big names, which I will refrain from mentioning right now, out there that are doing quite well in the vegan space. And so we kind of saw that, and we started offering flax, chia, and pea protein as well. The pea protein is kind of the staple right now, but honestly, based upon, and I'm assuming your research will show this, that you've read through on articles, that pea protein itself is not a complete protein, which means that it doesn't have the full spectrum of aminos that a dairy or a whey does. And so most people, if you look at labels in the marketplace, if they use a pea, they're typically stacking it with the rice protein. That way you're getting the complete aspect, kind of like a rice and beans approach. So I've definitely seen that growing. We have a great footprint in that market as well. But yeah, some people just like staying away from the animal product, if you will, quote unquote, and they like, you know, the vegan, more of the holistic natural approach. And you're right. You know, I see a lot of people that like it because although the taste might be hit or miss depending upon the company you work with, it tends overall to make them feel better on the stomach and overall well-being.
Justin, let me ask you then, I don't want to put you on the spot because I know you work for the company, but there's probably varieties of protein, obviously, but what do you use? Like, what's in your cupboard?
Man, I jump around. You know, obviously I have access to Optimum BSN, so, you know, because I buy so much, I use theirs once in a while. And sometimes, honestly, I'll send myself just straight raw. I'm not a taste guy. I'm old school, probably like you guys are, where, you know, 3-4 ounces of milk, it doesn't matter what it tastes like as long as it gets down. So me, I've never been a flavor guy, so I can pound raws. You know, so sometimes I'll have raws sent to my house. You know, but outside of that, I kind of like looking to see, you know, even from, you know, obviously the supplements are very diverse these days. You know, anywhere from Blackstone Labs down in Florida, they kind of do the more of the hard-nosed bodybuilder type of ingredients, if you will. You know, but True Teen's a good protein out there that I've tried before. You know, honestly, I've tried about all of them anymore. But right now, I have BSN in my cupboard. I typically like to put on some weight around the winter time, and so BSN tends to have just their basic Synthesis. You know, it's a concentrate isolate blend, and they do have some malto in there. So you're getting around 200 calories a pop. Was for me right now. I can use that. So that's what I currently have in my cupboard.
Gotcha.
One thing I was going to mention too, you talked about hydrolyzed protein. So years ago, when hydrolyzed was just kind of sort of coming out, I basically would order the proteins, basically raws, from a guy, and he's like, "Oh, you should try this hydrolyzed. It's really good." He's like, "But it's really bitter."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh, it can't be that bitter." He's like, "No, man, it's pretty bad."
No, man.
All right, send me some. You know, I said, "Oh, just put some flavor in it or whatever." The flavoring didn't get added, I think, because when I actually filled out the form, I forgot to check the little box or whatever. And I get it, and, you know, I'm putting it in, and like, huh, it smells a little funky. And I think it was a 520 at that time, so 520 Daltons. So that it's just a way of measuring how much it's been hydrolyzed. So
Correct.
Pretty high degree of hydrolyzation. And I put in a little container. I'm standing in my sink in the kitchen, and I swig it back, and I'm like, oh my God, and I like spit it out like all over the kitchen sink. And
Well, it's funny you mentioned the Dalton.
horrible stuff.
That, you know, we have a couple different types of hydrolyzed. So I mean, there's a full-blown hydrolyzed, which is typically between 12 and 14% degree of hydrolysis, which is going to be maybe what you tried, because that's going to be the most bitter. And you pop a jug open on that of raw, like you know. But we also do partially hydrolyzed, which is around 3 to 4 degree hydrolysis, just because of that, because it's much easier to work with on the flavor side, and it's a little bit cheaper as well. So we kind of have something that'll fit everyone's needs. But if you really want to try something better, I can send you some peptides. I mean, that's kind of what we're known for. My buddy Brent in our R&D designs a lot of our new peptides, our new proteins we come out with, and he's definitely on the ball. But our peptides are known specifically, and this will actually tie into the curcumin study you did. Curcumin is known to have I wouldn't say bad, but lower solubility, lower bioavailability. And what's interesting with our peptides is it solves all of that. And so when we essentially take a curcumin base and we attach it to a peptide, so essentially a hydrolyzed whey isolate, and with that, it increases the bioavailability, the solubility goes through and through. We've even done studies on our creatine mono that mixes through and through. As you know, mono tends to be like gravel and sits at the bottom sometimes. So it's quite interesting. But my main point there is the peptides definitely perform, but it comes with the territory, that's for sure.
Gotcha.
You just said you could add a curcumin to a peptide. Is that correct?
Yep, and
wow.
We've been doing studies on that internally. And it's neat. We've taken that, and what we do is we leverage that technology, and we pick things that specifically that aren't soluble, that aren't really bioavailable, and we've seen great things thus far. So it's kind of an interesting approach that we bring that's much different than other people in the industry, other than our basic WPC, WPI business.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Turmeric protein.
Right. I would buy it.
Yep.
I'd buy that.
Yeah.
I don't want to make
Might
this
as well
sound
stock up.
like an ad or anything. Okay, in the nature of time or interest of time, tell us about a typical day. If listeners were, again, maybe we're encouraging them to reach out like you've done, being the ballsy and educated guy once you get into the industry, but they don't know what they're getting into, right? Like, so from your internship days, like, was it structured, what they showed you, or what you do now? Any insights at all about like typical days and what you've experienced?
Yeah, so I mean, like currently, obviously our footprint is quite large in the marketplace, so there's a lot of internal things that go on within Glanbia itself. I mean, we work with multiple people at the brand owner level, but most definitely at the co-manufacturer level. So, with that said, it's always this kind of a dance, if you will, to make sure that the co-man and the brand owner are always in line, whether it's price, product, availability, timeline, et cetera, et cetera. So typically what happens is if I bring someone on board with me, they want to buy an isolate, for instance. It's just a matter of streamlining and understanding what their needs are. So it all kind of starts at volume and forecast. And so that gets pushed back to a production team that then looks at that at the plant level and says, okay, this is what we make. This is how many customers buy this. Can't either yes, we can slot them in, or no, we can't. Now, the reason I say that is because the market right now is super, super tight. So WPC prices come up substantially. It's very tight in the marketplace. The WPI seems to hold on price, but it's also really, really tight. So when the market tightens like this, we really have to go down to brass tacks and say, okay, this is where we're at. This is what we're producing. Because in reality, even though we're so large, we're the number one supplier of WPI in the world, number two WPC. We still only make so much because there's only so much milk that's coming in to make the cheese to then make the whey. Okay. So within that process, there's also a quality assurance team, there's an allocation team, there's a logistics team. And so I have probably 4, 5, 6 different teams always working in tandem from the point of an order to a delivery. And that's going to be with, hundreds and hundreds of customers that we have. So it's always quite interesting to see it all kind of function and come together. It's actually quite cool.
Right. It sounds like there's a big, it's funny that you said when you reached out for that sort of home run job, it sounded more like business management, but you've really been sort of, maybe not forced, but you really moved toward merging your science background with the business background, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that original one I said I applied for was more business development, but I'm a sales guy. And what I like about it is, I can bring, some sales guys, they may or may not have a scientific background. They might not understand the process or the quality or what even an isolate or a concentrate might be in some circumstances.
Yes,
but the thing that's neat with it is I can speak to someone, like yourself and Mike, 2 doctors here that have backgrounds in research and studying. But I can also talk to a purchasing person that buys protein. I can talk to a business development and talk about formulas and what's next and what's kind of up and coming and what they're looking for. So, honestly, it's nice because it kind of makes me more versatile in when I do business with my customers.
Right. I can tell you, I was already fussing this episode, and I often do, about science journalists not knowing what they're talking about, and they'll say something and make me wince. In fact, next week I'm gonna go on a tirade about anti-protein fools because I've had it with them, and I'm gonna cite real stuff from the news, and then we had a listener write in, actually also send in some stuff, John from the New York Times. And I mean, we've got to stop some of this protein paranoia. I think I'm going to write an article for T-Nation, send something at least to Chris Shugart, called "What Can I Eat? What May I Eat?" Because, you can't eat fats for all these reasons. Don't eat carbs for all these reasons. Oh, protein's bad, And so it gets frustrating. But that extends to the sales side, too. I really dislike when a salesperson, especially if Mike, you probably have experienced this, they don't know your background. You walk into a GNC or anytime you're confronted with the salesperson who doesn't have any type of background, and the spiel that they spew at you, and you're just like, oh my God, you have no idea. You really don't know what you're talking about, do you? You know, and that sounds elitist, and I don't want to sound like some smug a-hole, but
But you're right, though, Doc. I mean, it is true, and I guess that's why I prided myself even when I went to college work in retail, because I knew what I was selling. I was passionate about what I'm selling. But unfortunately, you will run into that this day and age where you have a guy that's there just to be there to make a paycheck, and he might not know exactly what he's selling, what the brand is, what the formula is, how it can benefit you, whether it's weight loss or muscle building or endurance. You know, there's so many different outlets anymore in this industry, if you will, that it is what it is, but it is unfortunate that you do run across those guys. But it's always a breath of fresh air when you sit down and you talk to someone that knows their stuff, that's researched it, and is passionate about it. You know, you can see it through and through when you meet some of these folks in person.
Yeah, even from a business perspective, I mean, product knowledge has to be part of what the salesperson must know. You know, they have to have really solid product knowledge. But we're talking with nutritionals. Man, it's hard to take someone who they didn't even have a basic nutrition 101 course, and they're supposed to have some in-depth product knowledge as far as features and benefits and that sort of thing, because they just don't have the background,
Right.
So you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. The thing that's also nice about our company as a whole. Not that I'm biased, but quite honestly, like, we have a solid R&D team. We have probably over 40, 50 different proteins. That's what's kind of interesting about it. We do anything from bars to RTM, ready to mix, RTD, which is a ready to drink, yogurt systems, ice creams, like you name it, we can find a protein for it. And some of them are straight up WPC, WPI, some of them are blends. Each is going to have their own performance factor depending upon the application. And so, I don't know everything. I don't, just because we have so many different proteins. And so what's cool is I have an R&D that focuses on bars, that focuses on sports nutrition, RTMs, et cetera, et cetera. And then also I have a product management team that also supports me. So their job is to solely focus on the 10 proteins that are in the bar category, and they are an expert in that. So if I run up against something that I'm not quite sure, I might not have done any business or research on in past, it's always nice to be able to fall back on a solid team to kind of help push it over the line and educate that customer.
Right. In fact, I am about to co-author a paper. I'm going to publish a paper, and it's an update on protein in sports nutrition. So I might pick your brain in a very non-commercial, non-marketing way about what you might think, again, not on air here, but about some of the recent trends, like what you were saying about some of the filtration methods overtaking the ion exchange and things like that, because I want it to be as current as possible. But okay, last question, because we're just about out of time. What should consumers be wary of in our industry? Let's try to narrow it to protein as much as possible, but what should consumers be wary of?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of shoot you straight here. So the sports world always hasn't had a good rap. There's always been a few folks out there, that want to dabble in things they're not supposed to. More specifically on the protein side, obviously everyone has seen and heard about the protein spiking in past, and I can tell you that's gotten much, 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 much better. So protein spiking, in short, for folks that might not know, they typically will take a even below an 80% protein, and we're talking 34, 50, depending upon what they can get their hands on. For us, it's a 34% protein that we offer, and then they'll ramp up the glycine and some of these other aminos. And so when it tests, it reads that it's testing at 25 grams of protein, but in reality, they really might have 4 or 5 grams in there. And so I can say that it's gotten much better. I don't receive phone calls anymore that people are looking for that protein going into a sports application. So that one, I don't think you have to be as wary anymore. Most folks are pretty good about that. And quite honestly, it's because enough people have gotten into trouble where, obviously none of the supplement world is regulated by the FDA, but when these occurrences have come up in past, the FDA really kind of put their ears up and started looking into some of those things. And so I can say now that people are much, much better. I guess the second thing I'll mention is what's much different now is people are trying to stay away from proprietary blends and going to open formulas, if you will. And that's not only just on protein, but just, pre-workouts and other products in general. Where in past it might have listed, 6,000 mgs of proprietary blend and then listing the ingredients. Now people are actually breaking it down, stating and claiming how much of each ingredient they have in there, which is a nice change of pace, because at one point in time, I never trusted anyone, quite honestly, when I was young, growing up, in high school and college. So what I would do is I'd buy each of the ingredients separately and I would dose them accordingly so I knew exactly what I was getting. So that's also getting much better as well, where people are wanting to be much more transparent to their customer base. Quite honestly, because a lot of folks are now listening more and more to podcasts and gentlemen like yourself, and they're more educated than they once were, which is a good thing, I think. And so, and the same thing goes for the protein side, where you have some people that still will list a blend, and that's fine and all. But due to regulations, they can get away if they wanted to putting, a 90% WPC and like a 10% WPI, and claim that it's 50-50, unfortunately. And so you do see some protein guys out there going that same extent as a pre-workout, where they're doing percentage of each or total grams per each. And so I really think that's something to look for as well, the openness that a brand is willing to share.
Right. I never liked that proprietary blend thing. Yeah. And my understanding on the regulatory side is there might be increasing pressures over the next year or two to actually disclose that. So, yeah, you don't see this one dose, X number of milligrams, and then who knows what's really in there, kind of thing. But let me ask one more thing. I know we're going over, but I really want to know this because I honestly am a little confused at the moment. And I think we should get Nick Berter or Stu Phillips on here in future weeks, invite them. And so, Dr. Nelson, I need you on this too. So, similar to the nitrogen spiking thing or the protein spiking concept of inflating that gram dose, specific to protein bars, I do a new sports nutrition lab in class, and I just have the students look at the ingredients list. And, for example, if you see something like collagen, hydrolyzed gelatin as the first or second or third ingredient on the list, isn't that similar to the concept of protein spiking? Because aren't those very low quality proteins? Now, here's where I'm confused. Recent studies have suggested in older men, you can give them collagen, and apparently it helps them make muscular gains. And that protein is so incredibly incomplete. I don't see how that's possible. So what are your thoughts about putting, when you look at a blend, and instead of having like whey protein concentrates and isolates early in the list, or casein or whatever it might be, you see collagen or gelatin really high on that list. Is that similar to the protein spiking idea, and does that make you wary of that? It's just they're trying to inflate the grams of protein. What do you think,
Doc? You want to take a stab at it, or you want me to go first?
You go first, and I'll add to yours.
So here's kind of my take on that. And I know folks that work with the collagen, and honestly, the main reason, and I guess this is a positive aspect, the main reason that I have a couple folks looking at that in their blends, not so much on the bar side, but mainly the RTM side, is more of kind of a curcumin approach, where it's supporting joints, elbows, ligament. More that approach is the main reason that they're putting that in there. Now, the second reason also is the price point. Obviously, that protein is going to be very I don't want to say cheap, but affordable. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of a 2-for-1 there, where it is affordable, but they focus more on the joint support. Now, that could not be true for some other folks out there, but for the folks that I work with, that's always kind of been their mindset. Right.
I guess my concern is, again, I'm not going to name brands, but I can think of 2 or 3 right now, some of which you can just pick up at Walmart, for example. Mm-hmm. And you go to the protein list. I want to see a high-quality protein as one of the first ingredients, right?
Yep, most definitely.
And when I see hydrolyzed gelatin or hydrolyzed collagen is in the top 3, and it's really hard to read the ingredients list sometimes because of these parenthetical statements. It'll say like icing or chocolate coating, and then there's all these things within a parentheses. So it's actually hard to read even the order of inclusion, in the product. But I was always wary that these were proteins that weren't particularly good for muscle protein synthesis, and if they're one of the first ingredients instead of what we know to be higher quality complete proteins, they're just throwing them in there to inflate that, to try to get that number up to 20 or 25 grams in the bar. That was my concern. But Mike,
Right.
what are your thoughts about not so much the gelatin, but like the collagen and hydrolyzed collagen? Because there's been some studies from reputable groups that suggest it's helpful. And I always thought that's woefully incomplete.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff I've seen, I haven't seen the studies you've been talking about yet. I definitely want to pull them up and give them a read. Everything I've seen shows very similar to you guys said, is that collagen is kind of still an incomplete protein from a term muscle protein synthetic response. But my guess, and this is just pure speculation on the studies because I haven't read them yet, is I've often wondered about in strength training how much soft tissue and other fascia and other structures like that may be possibly rate limiting. The tissue turnover rates for that kind of stuff is probably closer to 9-ish months, where muscle's closer to like 90 days. So there's a massive difference there in the amount of tissue that's being turned over. But I don't know, that's just a guess I would have on that. But I'd be very interested in learning more on that.
Right. Honestly, I'm sort of poring over PubMed. I'm trying to find some of these papers. I'm going to have to go back and take a look at them, but they surprised me a lot. But I guess at current, I'll stick to what I've been understanding, which is, if you see it high on the list and the intent is not joint support or something like that, the intent, I mean, if you're eating a protein bar, I would assume you're eating it for protein, and I don't want something that's incredibly incomplete in there. I mean, collagen. And again, I sort of half jokingly say hooves and horns. Nobody's getting big on hooves and horns. But at the same time, I understand there could be advantage of these things too, right? So I don't want to step on Justin's toes at all.
Honestly, Doc, I agree with you. I mean, like, if you're not promoting the what I had mentioned, then I definitely agree with you. And I even sometimes, quite honestly, and I'll shoot you straight, I even look at that from a label perspective, even on the dairy side, where if I see someone that's using a full-blown WPC. Yeah, that's honestly, that's great. I mean, everyone has their own marketplace. Everyone has their own demographic that they sell to, and some folks just can't afford to fully invest in a formula. I mean, even if you get into the artificial flavoring system, even to a natural flavoring system, some people are okay with sucralose. Some people want the stevia monk fruit, and so it's really just a matter of who you're marketing to. But for me personally, I always like to stick to a WPI at the least on a label to start, just because I know the background on it, what it costs per pound, and so I can see, okay, this person is investing in their formula. They want the best for the customer, but unfortunately, not everyone can do that. But me personally, that's kind of what I look for. So I definitely understand where you're coming from on this other.
Right, and I know Dr. Nelson and I, we've worked with enough. We've done enough consulting with companies. I understand if something like gelatin or collagen, if it's way down the ingredients list, and again, this is much more of a problem with bars than it would be with powders, of course. If it makes it soft enough you can actually bite into the bar, I'm all for it, right? But when it's one of the first two ingredients, it makes me think, I'm not going to spend $2.50 on this freaking protein bar.
Right.
That's all.
The thing with bars, though, which I'm sure you've seen on the consultant basis, bars are tough. They really are.
Very
I mean,
hard.
there's an art to making a bar taste good, feel good, the pliability, the pack on it in terms of when you bite into it. So that's kind of what's cool about our offerings is we come up with these blends, and so that way you can stay away from a collagen. You can stick to an isolate, and you can stick to like a whey isolate and a milk isolate is kind of one of our top blends, if you will. And so you can completely stay away from that. It's just a matter of the resources and the tools the brand owner or the manufacturer might have.
Right on.
Yeah, and last comment I had too, I think the technology has come, I sound like the old fart here, but Lonnie can relate to this too, is that the technology has come a long way for protein manufacturing and just taste.
Most definitely.
I mean, I remember in the early 90s, the first protein I ever used was the old Joe Weider egg protein.
Oh, yeah.
My roommate in college had it, unflavored. It was the most disgusting thing ever, but you're like, this is what you need to get big. So you're like, cool.
Right.
And then
it's definitely coming
came
out.
along, and it's so, like, I tried some of the new proteins from, like, First Form had some a while ago. like Fruit Loop flavored root beer barrel, and I'm like, this is amazing.
What?
It's like, holy crap.
These flavors now are like it's long gone are the old school days. Like for me, when my customers want to talk about flavor, or we have samples done for them, it's like, I have no idea because I drink about anything. But you're definitely right, Mike. I mean, people are coming out with these more innovative cereal flavors, you know, delicate, these desiccant flavors.
Like it was amazing.
Right.
Yeah, I hear you.
Long gone are the days that protein tastes like shit. Like most proteins now taste pretty damn good. So
I can tell you, in '91, I was living in San Diego, and I was dealing with a nasty bout of lactose intolerance. I think it was actually viral, but my only option was a soy-based protein, and it was literally like drinking sawdust in milk. It was, or not milk, in water. It was repugnant. I could not, and so nowadays, again, old fart, and I know we're out of time, but oh my God, people have it so easy. They can get low carb flours. They can, like back in the day, if we were avoiding carbs, we just ate vegetables, salads.
You crazy bastard.
Yeah, how crazy is that, right? Or if you couldn't have lactose, you just had to stay away from the dairy stuff. And and what a shame, because it's so protein synthetic, and such a great sports nutrition product and stuff. But yeah, things have come such a long way with the tech, that's for sure. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us. A little extra long
Justin.
episode.
That was awesome.
Yeah, that was great.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Good stuff. And like I said, Justin, I will be in touch with you because I want some industry input, if possible, on this paper that I'm working on. Because if I'm going to update people on protein, I got to know what's, what consumers are looking for and that kind of stuff too. So
yeah, most definitely. If you and Mike ever need anything, you have my email, you have my cell. Always feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to help.
Right on. Okay, everybody. Until next week.
Hey listeners, have you seen the store at IronRadio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowery, and they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the stores. We try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at IronRadio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the IronRadio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.